about 3 miles out of town, out of Grapeland on the Rock Hill Road at her grandfather's home. And it was thought that her mom was going to die after delivery. And the doctor had several children already. And knowing that my grandfather, Dorothy Geis, was going to be a single man, he offered to adopt my mom into his own family. But my grandfather said, no way, this little girl is going to stay with me. Well, God was gracious. Nanny didn't die. Actually lived until Mom was 31 years old. And I remember, I was probably about 9 or 10 when Nanny died. And Nanny was a storyteller, and that got passed on down to my mom. She was a storyteller. They moved into town when Mom was about 2 or 3 years old. My grandfather, Dorothy, was joining his dad. They owned a store in town, and together they ran that store for multiple years. And Mom has fond memories of working with her dad in that store as well. She had an outdoor cat named Blackie. She loved Blackie. And Nanny would let her in the house every morning. Blackie would go right to Mom's bed, wake her up. She tells one story one time when she was out of town that Blackie was wandering around on a Sunday. And they weren't too far away from the church, First Baptist Grapeland. And Blackie made his way into an open door in the back, sort of walked up to the pulpit area, and the preacher was just preaching away. You know, he's not noticing any of this. Blackie walked around to the front of the pulpit, and there was cloth laying down the front. And Blackie just started crawling up the front of the pulpit. And then peeked over the top. The pastor looked down and goes, whoa! And everybody had been seeing what was going to happen with his reaction. The whole congregation just burst out laughing, and the pastor said, well, I've lost it today. Everybody's dismissed. Go home. Enjoy your day with your family. Dad grew up in Grapeland as well, Harry Kent, as well as you know, the Kent family. And he was 5 years older than Mom. And so they really didn't have anything to do with one another growing up. They knew of each other. His earliest recollection of her that he shared with me was that Mom was riding furiously around the porch on her home, on her tricycle. And he was looking at her. He says, that little girl's going to kill herself. But that's his earliest remembrance of Mom. Aunt Otis, Maud Otis, one day the doctor pulled up in front of her house and went in, and before too long he came out, and Mom was sitting on the porch noticing the doctor at Maud Otis's house. And when she learned later that Maud Otis now had a baby, she thought, wow. So she's just sat patiently on her porch now, waiting for the doctor to come. And after a couple of days, she went in to Nanny and said, Mom, when's the doctor going to bring us a baby? Well, she remained an only child, so that never came to fruition. When she was 12 years old, you know, it was apparent that the United States was soon going to be in war. It was 1940. And my folks had an aunt and uncle that lived in Orlando, not my folks, my parents. And so they decided they were going to take a trip. So in Dorothy's 38 Dodge, they all piled in, 6 of them, 3 in the front, including Mom, 3 in the back. And they drove from here to Orlando, Florida. And Mom remembers that all the way across to Alabama, it was simply gravel roads. Wow. Okay. Just how much things have changed since then. Well, when she got there, the aunt there in Florida was a wonderful cook. There was one thing that Mom said, there is no way I'm going to eat, and that was for breakfast. She was serving brains and eggs. Just said, nope. But everything else was great. When Mom was 13, in Grapeland, kids were allowed to drive the cars in town if they had their parents' permission. I don't know if that was true when you were growing up.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it was. Okay, there you go.
I was going.
In the 70s.
Yeah, in the 70s.
Well, Mom remembers
girl,
when
yeah.
she was 13, driving home, and her dad says, well, we're at war. Okay? Pearl Pearl Harbor had happened. Mom says, I didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was. Probably a lot of people didn't. But as a result of that, all the young men were heading off to battle. Mom at 17 finished high school and then went on to Baylor. Now she started in the summer school that year, and 1941, and she was going to major in business. But she, after one class, decided, nope, that's not for me. And she had had a PE teacher in high school that she just loved and was really influenced by her, so she changed her major to physical education. She graduated with a degree in physical education. The war had ended just within months after her starting at Baylor, and now all the young men were coming back to school, and the Baylor was almost a totally girls' school at the time because of the war. But she said it was she described it as such a happy time now that the war was over and the boys were coming back home. Well, when Dad, Harry, came back home, that 5-year age difference, he didn't seem quite as significant anymore. And he thought, wow, that's a cute girl. So he had Vaden Streetman, who was his best friend, talk to my mom and said, hey, let's have a blind date. I have somebody for you. She goes, no way, I don't do blind dates. But Mom knew Vaden was going to keep pestering her until finally she said yes. So I says, okay, once. Well, that blind date turned out to be Harry. And after that date, she told her best friend, she says, you know what? I might fall in love with this guy. So that's how it all started out with a blind date between my mom and Dad. In 1946, on Dad's 24th birthday, he proposed to Mom at Baylor, because Dad was now back and attending Baylor again as well. And it was late at night, and the 10 o'clock chime started to ring right after he had proposed. Well, that meant that if you weren't in your dorm at the end of that 10th chime, you were grounded for a week for the girls. And so Mom took off her shoes right after being proposed to, and just started dashing for the dorm and made it just before that last chime rang. And so it was not grounded. They married in 1947 at First Baptist on June 2nd, 1947. And they lived in a trailer complex for the veterans and their wives that were going to school there on the Baylor campus. Mom had not learned how to cook as growing up. Dad owned a restaurant. Why would you need to learn how to cook? So the only thing she'd ever made was fudge. So Dad was the guinea pig. He got to get all the experiments. But I must attest, as I was growing up, she was an excellent cook. She made a wonderful roast with carrots and potatoes, and that cornbread dressing. I love that Texas cornbread dressing. She did a great job with that as well. They both graduated in 1948. Mom was 20 years old when she graduated from Baylor. Already married at 19, 20 years old. Got her first job as a PE teacher in Grand Prairie. Okay? And that's where we were living when I was born. She was there for 3 years and taught all 3 years in elementary school, other than that maternity leave in 1950 when I showed up. I was due on March the 9th. The doctor had told her, you cannot gain more than 20 pounds. I'm not sure that's the guidance anymore, but that's what he told her. And she was, my mom, she was strict about some things. So if somebody told you something that she thought was important, she would do it. So that whole time she'd been starving herself. And so I was due the 9th, didn't show up. On the 10th, my dad was going to be driving to work. Mom said, on the way to work, I want you to drive me and drop me off at the Dairy Queen, which was half a mile from the house. She says, I'm buying a hot fudge sundae. I haven't had chocolate for 9 months. I don't care. And so that's what she did. And walked all the way home, hoping that would stimulate a birth, but it didn't. So on the 11th, the next day, she finally started feeling contractions. So she knew that first children are slow to come, and she didn't want to be at the hospital long time. So both Mom and Dad said, well, let's go to a movie. So they went to the movie, And Mom said there was a clock on the wall, so all during the movie she was timing her contractions with that clock that was on the wall. And they lasted the whole movie. So then they drove to the hospital in downtown Dallas, where I was born in Dallas. And the nurses said, hey, first children, they're slow. Told my dad, go across the street to the diner, have some coffee, get something to eat, got plenty of time. So he did that. As soon as he came back, they said, congratulations, you're a father. So that baby was a lot closer than anybody had thought. Maybe Mom knew better, but nobody else would accept that. So it was in, she was 22 and moved to Jacksonville, Texas, and taught at the 8th grade in East Side School. And Dad taught at Lon Morris Junior College, and that was a Methodist school, maybe still is. And they were the only Baptist faculty, and so they inherited BSU, the Baptist Student Union Ministry, on that campus. So it was just met in their house. Then in '55, Dad was called by Glenn Eason, who was from Grapeland, who was then the dean at Grand Canyon College, and he was invited to come out to interview for the position of business manager in Phoenix, which on Easter weekend, because Mom was teaching, they drove straight through from Jacksonville to Phoenix, interviewed on Friday, Dad got the job. On Saturday, they went out shopping and bought a house, $6,500 for their first home. Oh dear, things changed a little bit since then. And then Glenn Eason called the superintendent of the Alhambra Elementary District and said, hey, I have a teacher you should consider. So he said, well, bring her over. So on Easter morning, Mom showed up at the district superintendent's home. They signed a contract, so she had a job. And then on Monday, drove straight back through to Jacksonville. So all of that, a 4-day Easter weekend. And that summer in '55, we moved out to Phoenix. So that's where I'll live. Dave, I think, is going to pick up on it a little bit more after that took place. Mom was so kind to everybody she met. I didn't realize it. She was just Mom. I had my 2 best friends in grade school told me, he says, your mom is so nice. That's the first time it ever registered to me, like, she's different than other moms. But you know what? As I continued to watch her life and how people reacted to her, the caregivers where she was, they would tell me, your mom is so nice. I said, why do you say that? She says, because she never complains. She doesn't get angry at us. She doesn't use harsh words. And that was true. She was just always kind. Well, I remember one time when I did something wrong, and she got out. She was going to spank me, which she did. And in my lack of wisdom, I said, that didn't hurt. That was a mistake. We did it again. Mom loved to take little short trips with me when I would visit her in Phoenix, or she'd come to Florida. I don't know if you're familiar with the Eagles song, but we drove up to northern Arizona and got our picture standing in the corner in Winslow, Arizona, which was sort of a fun thing to do. She loved chocolate, as you might know, and at 95, okay, and I actually have the receipt on the date that this happened, so I know it was October 9th, 2023. She was 95 years old. I took her to Mary Coyle's, her very third ice cream place. And she would always order a hot foot sundae. And so I was ordering for her, and she was standing next to me, too frail and over a walker. And I said, my mom would like a hot foot sundae, please. And she really likes hot fudge. Well, Mom, not to let it stop at that, went ahead and piped in, give me as much as the law will allow. And so they actually wrote that on the receipt. And so I took a picture of the receipt. As much as the law will allow. That was great. That was great. You know, just a couple other things that I miss about my mom. When I called on the phone, she'd always go, hello, my dear. And there's just a sort of a lilt in her voice. Hello, my dear. I miss being able to share good news with her. You know, just to pick up the phone and tell her something that had happened that had encouraged me or been a blessing in my life. She loved Mexican food. We had our favorite place. I miss our lunches together at Carlos O'Brien's. And we would drive around Phoenix and explore, and she liked stopping at Einstein Bagels and getting her everything bagel and a cup of coffee. I'll miss that with her. I miss her expressions of love for my clouds in Florida, because Phoenix is somewhat dry, doesn't have clouds too often. She'd always come and she said, I love your clouds. She loves your clouds. And I just miss her being here. But I don't wish that she would still be here, lacking her eyesight, lacking her hearing, losing her mental facilities. She is free and released and rejoicing in the presence of our Lord right now. So how can I be anything but excited for her as we are here remembering her today? It is a day of joy in my mind and estimation, and I want you, as you're interacting with me, to know that it's a day of joy, okay? And feel free to share anything fun or funny or anything like that that you might remember about my mom. Thanks.